This is Thorin from On Gamers, and got a new kind of video series we're going to try out here. This is the first one. Basically, since LCS, especially LCS NA, has been kind of deadlocked for so much of the season, and you see bottom teams getting sometimes winning records or trading wins with the teams who are in theory dominating the league, and then you see such a deadlock between the top teams, and it's kind of hard to figure out, okay, in what areas is one team actually better than the other if the record is tied, you know. Well, we've kind of come up with an idea here where I've got my stats team, guys like Spellsy, those guys, they work all day on stats in League of Legends, coming up with interesting stuff. But obviously just stats on their own, you look at them and it's sometimes hard to tell, aside from if one number is bigger than another, like in what way is this better? What does that signify? And so what we're going to do here is we're going to take individual teams and we're going to use some of the stats that they've come up with, interesting trends, patterns, a number that like, oh, this is an outlier here. We're going to try and kind of figure it out together and see if we can find some context or food for thought or a talking point that people can go back and forth on and no, I think this means that. So the first team we'll start off with in this feature is going to be CLG, Counter Logic Gaming, coached by my buddy Monte Cristo. And so that's actually where we'll kind of start with the stats that he's given me, because he first of all gave me some what you call systematic stats, as in like the meta, the play style in general. So the first thing that's worth noting with CLG, and kind of a trend that we'll do when we do this, is we'll not only look at the team now, but ideally if they still had the same members, we'll look at them, what's changed since previous splits, and then splits before when they still had some players but maybe they changed some, because then you can see maybe the impact of a player coming in or a difference in style. So the first thing to note with CLG actually is that they went from being the worst in the league in terms of game time. They had the longest games in the summer split of last year, where they had the lineup that was, you know, it was the first that Monty had inherited. It was the lineup that had Big Fat LP as the jungler. It had Nian Tonso playing his first season as top laner. And then Chauster had gone back to support. That was the change. So no Afromu. This is when Link was having his first like big season as the like full-on mid laner, because if you remember, he'd been like he'd taken over towards the end from Big Fat LP in CLG before. So this was a brand new team, but Monty had just taken over them. And listen, with that lineup and the results in that season, no, it makes sense. And they were the worst in the league. They were in 8th place in terms of average game time. And listen, it makes sense if you think about it. That team then really struggled to understand the meta game of, not the meta game, more the macro game of League of Legends. They had a pretty poor understanding of rotations, taking towers, closing a game out. If they got a slight lead, they were one of those teams that famously would just have a big fight or a Baron bait that they just took a fight on and they'd just lose the whole game from it. And they'd have a slight lead and then they'd have one fight where the other team took it and took the whole game back, and that's why they finished 5th place that split. It makes sense. Well, the thing is, obviously, you go into the Season 4 and you go into the Spring Split, and now we've got Dexter comes in. Now we've got Nian Tonso was still there top lane, remember last split? He was still there. Afromu returns as support. So we have a few changes here, but I think not. And I think that's actually something you can point to here, because they went from last place in terms of average game time to 1st place, and they've actually maintained that through to this split now. So now you think of CLG. Now let's put that in context. Okay, now they do close out games. Not every time. They still have a few key ones that stick in your memory of big games that they lose. But in general, no, they're quite good at closing out games now. And that's what you're going to see as we go to the next stat, because the next stat was about what they're like in terms of like where are they getting the leads from, that, or where are they getting the stats that allow them to close the game out. So you would think to yourself, if you're talking about closing out games and closing them out quickly, when you have a lead and you take a small lead, turn it into a bigger lead, and then just close the game. Usually, you'd think of something like a Cloud9 approach from last year, and from the summer split last year and spring split this year. And the Cloud9 approach was just find ways to get those dragons over and over, where you're getting uncontested dragons. You're always getting the 1st or 2nd dragon. It's like either you get the fight you want from the dragon, or you just get it uncontested entirely. This time around, actually, this split, it's actually not that way. That's not where CLG is getting that's not where their stats are like showing off. What's actually happening is, in terms of getting the 1st dragon, they get the least out of all the teams in the league, believe it or not. In terms of the Baron count, it's really low. Only Cloud9 out of the big teams is lower. They have the least dragons per minute out of all those top 5 teams: TSM, LMQ, Dignitas, Cloud9. Yeah, that's the 5. They have the least dragons per minute. So you think is, well, where's it coming from? Well, where it comes from is kills and towers. So that makes sense. Second most kills in NALCS. The only team more is LMQ, and we've seen LMQ, like Zhao Weizhao. Those guys just love to fight. And if they even get a lead, they're not going to close out their game by systematically taking objectives. They're just going to keep fighting and get the lead bigger and bigger and bigger and snowball the whole game. So, okay, you can see it's a skilled lineup, this CLG lineup. They get a lot of kills. They have good laning, but also, crucially, they have the most towers per minute in NALCS. So think about that. That's actually a sign that you're really getting good at closing games out. First of all, that means when you're in those tight games, you're staying afloat with the other team. You're taking a tower in response to them taking a tower. They take a dragon, you take the top tower. But more crucially, when you do get a lead, you're able to figure out a way to turn that into a win without having to just take team fights like the old CLG would, where you can risk losing it, or when more variance comes into it. Instead, you've learned. This is where I think you actually see the effect of Monty, because this is the kind of game he preaches, you know. He likes to win the game where you take your small advantage, and by using map pressure against the opponent, you force them into more mistakes, or you just compound your own little advantages into a huge advantage that then you can turn much more easily into a big win, because you've got more gold, you've got more items, you've got the whole map pushing into them. You're forcing them to play your game, you know. You're not just gonna, okay, have a lead, have some advantages, have a gold lead to some extent, but then take a fight where maybe the gold didn't even have that much of a difference there because the fight was uncoordinated, it wasn't one you'd wanted, it hasn't been in the area of the map you want, it's not the time of the game you want. You're just taking a fight because you're just hoping that you can outskill them. Instead, this is a systematic approach to how to break teams down. I think that's what you've seen from CLG this season, even if their big losses tend to be the times that they can't figure out how to do that, when they don't realize, like, oh, we could have just split pushed and that would have won the whole game. Instead, we took the fight there. But I think what's key there is the misses that they're having kind of point to like when they're actually making it and when they're winning. There's a logic behind it that actually, oh, I can see how they're breaking it down. And actually, that's why I say you have to credit Monty for a lot of this, because when they have the games where it breaks down, you can see that they're not like a Cloud9 where at all points in the game there's like a cerebral sort of like observing intelligence behind them, where you can see how they're figuring out, like, how are we going to get back into this game? Or if we have a small lead, like, okay, what should we add up here? With CLG, it looks a lot more drilled, okay? They're getting taught by, I mean, think of it like one of those examples of like a rat in a maze, and then if it gets electrocuted when it goes down the wrong alley, eventually you don't even have to have an electric element there. It just won't go down that area. It's learned, like, okay, if I go this way, it works out better for me. That's kind of the approach I see with CLG here. Drilling them over and over. So there's kind of a flow chart mentally of like, if this happens, then we do this. But if something else happens, in certain circumstances, we have a different response. And once you've learned those enough, they will become instinctive. So then you don't have to consciously think about it and potentially make the wrong decision or weigh things up that like you can't make a decision between in the moment. You've learned when X happens, we always do Y. When A happens, B is the correct answer. Unless I land the variables there, and then we do D instead. So I think that's something you've seen from CLG. Now, if you go to effect of certain players, then let's just look at some of the champions. Because obviously one of the big changes from the summer split last year to now was the arrival of Dexter. This guy was one of the best junglers in Europe. He'd come from Lemondogs, who'd finished the split in first place in the regular portion in Europe. He comes over, and I actually think that he's a big reason as to why Monty was able to kind of turn the ship around in terms of results. Yeah, their team got better, but as you'll see if you go and watch my reflections with Dexter, Dexter was a guy where he was really open to the idea of like, okay, let's have some real coaching. Let's have some like actual plan that we're going to put into play here. And you know what? If there aren't that many shot callers and aren't that many people who are confident in the game, then I can be kind of like a vessel for the philosophy that Monty's going to give me. And so I'm his general in the game. If he tells me like, Dexter, I want you to do this and this and keep this guy in line this way, then that's what he's going to try and kind of do in the game. So one of the key aspects is Dexter loves Elise. Now 8 of their wins out of the 10 that they'd won, I think when we did these stats, 8 of their wins came when they had Elise. Oh no, actually I think they were on 13 wins overall. So 5 came without Elise, and they had 10 games in total with Elise. So they won 8 out of 10 games with Elise. Go to another player who's a new player. Now he's not technically new. Afromu was with them before. He was in the spring split of 2013. But okay, he came back this year, and he came for the spring split. And we've seen not only has he built up that synergy with Doublelift that they never truly had in 2013, but he's now developed individually into a player where he can control the pace of the game. He controls that bot lane in a way where Doublelift before, I always think of Doublelift as like a really powerful weapon, but you have to aim it. It's not like, what would you call it? Heat seeking. It's not like auto aiming. It doesn't have any intelligence to it in a sense. You have to kind of aim it, and you have to kind of know when to use it. You have to know, okay, this would be the wrong moment. I have to hold back now. Okay, now turn it loose, like full power. Or, okay, now we need a controlled pace. And that's kind of what you see Aphromoo doing. He doesn't just play the support, everyone just support. He kind of actually dictates the lane, and he decides that, okay, this is a trade where I can turn Doublelift loose. So we'll win this trade. Like, this would be a good time to pressure. Other times, he knows, like, oh, no, this is the wrong time. Like, our jungler's out of position. We're not going to get the counter gank, or we're actually probably going to die to a gank here. That's when he kind of keeps him under control. And you see, he doesn't just do it in game. He does it kind of a bit psychologically. So what's a factor that's playing into how Aphromoos had success? Morgana and Braum. Now, Morgana obviously has been a strong pick for a while now. If you combine these two champions, then in 13 games, they've managed 11 wins when they have one of these two champions at support. Whereas in 7 other games with other supports, only 2 wins there. So they found the strong picks here that work for Aphromoo and work for what he wants to do in the game and work for his synergy with Doublelift. And they managed to find out a winning formula here, at least until this point. Like, we don't know what changes will come to those champions, but we're seeing here these core champions. These are the go-to champions which are bringing them a lot of success, even if it's not like they just pick them 100%. They're mixing other champions in, even if it's not working as much. Link. Okay, one thing about Link is he's always been considered like a cerebral player and someone who, because he practices a lot, like very varied player. You don't think of Link and just think of one champion, that you can only play that champion. We've really seen that this season because Link has an average champion pool of 9 different champions, and not only that, he's won on 8 different champions. Now, obviously, listen, LCSNA isn't OGN, so we're not going to say he's like Faker in like the winter season of last year where he had that unreal champion pool while winning the whole league in every single game, but that's impressive. You find a lot of mid laners, even to this day, they have the 1 or 2 champions they're really strong on, and that's what you're targeting against. Or if you give it to them, you know, like, oh, I know what they'll pick if I leave it open, and then I can build my plan around that. With Link, that's really not the case, and we know he doesn't necessarily go for the hard carry style of mid laner. So this stat makes sense because he's picking things that situationally will work with the comp or will work with the other picks they're getting in the game to provide strong synergies for what they want to accomplish, to be able to have like a strong comp that has an identity, because that's what they want to be able to close out games by knowing the win conditions. That's something you'll always hear Monty preach and drill into his players, is know your win conditions. It's not just about outpick someone in the lane and get a cool champion here, because then if it doesn't synergize well, then how will you know what conditions overall would provide you with a win versus them? Because the key thing about knowing your win conditions is that it will then contrast against theirs. So not only do you know what you want to do, you want to know what you want to not allow the others to do, or not to play into their hands in doing. And if you do that, you will manage to get away from the old CLG mentality of taking these silly fights or taking engagements when you didn't even have a team that was necessarily set up for team fighting. Like, if you understand this level of the game, and then you take out that individualistic mentality of like, well, I'm good on this champion and I'm strong right now in the game and I'm winning my lane, so let's take this fight and I'll win the fight. And there's a different way to win the game. And I think that's what you've seen from CLG here. So let's look at some more stats here. When you go down to taking that stat about Link and his deep champion pool, it actually applies to the whole of CLG, believe it or not. If you look at the whole league and you go through all their games, they actually have a higher success rate on new champions and in terms of more champions than anyone else in the whole league. Their percentage is at 80% in terms of unique wins and unique champions. 80%. It says through 80 games on my stats here. The next highest is LMQ and Dignitas are both at 76%. But you go down, okay, a team like, let's have a look here. Okay, a team like Cloud9, they're down at 69%, even though they're getting all these wins. So again, you can see here, this is why I say, it's not just because I like Monty that I'm giving him credit in this sense. You can see his fingerprints on this, but not only that, but the way that we've got personnel now and a system which allows your strategy to actually be implemented, to become tangible in the real world. So what you find is, this means that they're not just picking a couple of champs or always going with the strong meta champs and getting the strongest comp just in terms of the general sense of the game, they're keeping people guessing here. They're doing different things, different times when they have a different objective in mind. Objective different, obviously, to map objectives. We're talking about the meta sense of objective. They're willing to use different champs, and as a result, they're obviously finding success on it as well because they're winning on the most different champs and they've got the most variety in champion pool. Well, when this is the case, now it becomes incredibly difficult to ban against you. Now it becomes difficult to even know what you will do in a game. Okay, so maybe you can know, for example, that Dexter will play Elise if it's open. And maybe you can know that if Morgana's open, Aphrodite was probably going to opt for that, right? But now, what is the mid laner going to play? You don't really know because, like I said, Link's champion pool is so wide. So it's really difficult if your opponent to know where your bans are going here. If we keep going forwards through my stats I've got here. Okay. In the early game, here's an interesting one. CLG has the second highest amount of kills in pre-10 minutes, but they also are tied for the most deaths pre-10 minutes. Now, I think that's pretty interesting because what you're seeing there is early on, they're willing to take risks of trades and fights that they will die in a lot, but the difference is okay, they're also willing to do it though to get the kill. Because here's the thing, once you understand how to close out from the mid game onwards, then actually it can be worth doing some gambles earlier in the game, because then when you get that slight lead that you can take from there and then stabilize the game, now you understand how to press that slight advantage into a win potentially, or create bigger advantages for yourself. Meanwhile, also, once you get the confidence in knowing that when we get to the mid game, we understand what to do, and we understand which objectives to take and in response, now you're also willing to gamble early with a strong team and strong laners that can win these fights, because you also know, okay, even if we do give up the early kills, let's say we don't get the kill and we die, actually now we have a sense of how to get back in the games. We're not just like frozen and worrying like, oh, what do I do to win my lane back again? You have a sense of like, no, that as long as we don't get too far behind, there's a team way to get back in the game as well. You can use the same approaches that let you build on a lead and win a game also allow you to gradually chip away and get back into a game. That's always been a problem in all team games that are strategic based, that especially in League I've noticed, that teams who are behind and they're lesser teams, they're the lower teams, they build up for that big Hail Mary play that'll win the whole game for them or lose the whole game, because they're thinking to themselves like, we're already losing anyway, so let's go for something crazy. Whereas actually, if you are confident that you know what you're doing and you think of yourself as a top team, then you can think of this logic. Well, if we're ahead of a top team, they don't usually do some crazy massive gamble against us. They play solid. They do small moves that can potentially get them, claw them back into the game. And then if we make a tiny mistake, that approach allows them to capitalize, and then they start to take the lead. Well, we can do the same back to them. We can chip. Instead of using what we would have previously used to get ahead a little bit, you can use to close the gap a little bit. You can chip away. It's a different mentality, but when you have that grinder mentality, you're going to win a lot more games because it provides consistency from both ends of it, whether you're ahead or behind. So going forwards, after the 10-minute mark, now you're wondering where does that turn? Okay, here's the key thing. Pre-20 minutes, they have the second highest kills still compared to LMQ. I mean, LMQ just love to fight. That's what makes them fun to watch, actually. But here's the key thing. They have their average deaths pre-20 minutes drops from tied for first down to tied for fourth. So now you can see, once we get past that 10 minutes, but pre-20 minutes, now we're in a world where they're still taking fights, they're still getting kills, they're still taking the risks, but now suddenly the actual risk part of it versus the reward part is dropped loads. So now you're getting really high reward, low to medium risk situations. Well, this is ideal for this sort of team. And again, that also will play into the mentality of what I said before. They know that they can afford to gamble early pre-10 minutes and take a fight, because if they don't get it, we'll look at this part of the game. They're getting so many kills here that you can lose a kill here, you can get two more 10 minutes later. That's actually something they can rely on if you look at the stats. They are the best overall when you look in this sense at the 10-minute to 20-minute range. So we've got the kills we just looked at there, but also they get a gold lead at 10 minutes in half of their games. And at 20 minutes in their games, they 70% of the time have a gold lead. So you can see that they're doing pretty well again up to 10 minutes. You know, it's going fine. Even though they're taking gambles, they're taking risks that can put you ahead. But then that 10 to 20 minutes, they're money. That's where they're getting these leads. And then from there, obviously, they can close things out. In fact, they were the team that had the most gold leads at 20 minutes. In 14 out of their 20 games, they had a gold lead at 20 minutes. This is the sort of control of a game you just didn't see from CLG before. You maybe saw a player like Doublelift get ahead and get fed in his lane, and potentially he could carry the game and win a big fight, or they could have one of those chaotic fights that could win a game for them. But this is a systematic approach where it's built on, there's foundations here. A really varied mid laner, strong jungler and strong support who can control the tempo of the game and know what they want to do when they get those good champions, knowing when you can gamble pre 10 minutes, knowing the solid part of the game where you make up a lead, or you get a lead, or you close the gap, 10 to 20 minutes, gold lead, kill lead. You can see the fundamentals that are leading to these wins that they're getting, that are putting them top of the lead. Now, the one player we're going to talk about at the end here, so we've kind of talked about everyone in the team almost. We all know Doublelift is like a potential star, and he's always going to be top 2 at his position, and it's kind of obvious what Doublelift does in terms of his game. So there's not that much in terms of stats we need to look at there, but we've talked about the jungler, we talked about the support, we talked about the mid laner. Now let's talk about the top laner, because this is the big change, this split, right? When they had Niantonso before very much was still put into that box that they had Hotshot GG in the end, where it was like, just play sort of a tank, try not to die, you don't have to win your lane, in fact, don't even really think about it, just try not to die, be useful in the fights, play a tank role, and that'll, the rest of the team we've upgraded piece by piece to that's enough. And you could see in the spring split, it was enough. They potentially could have got to the finals. This split around, they brought in Seraph. And obviously, I actually agree with something Monty said, which is I've never seen a rookie player put under this level of scrutiny. Like, think of it this way. People like Shifter, like Pobelter, these sorts of players, some of them actually have quite far back extending competitive experience and playing in top teams and playing with good players, etc. And even so, even when they start to emerge as stars, people aren't that harsh on them actually. When they're in bad teams, people don't expect the world from them. If they play badly, it's not that big a deal. With Seraph, people had this expectation, maybe because he's Korean, like he should be godlike from day one. And obviously that's not been the case. But actually, here's what's going to be interesting, and here's what people will actually think I wouldn't come up with this side of interpretation. If we look at the numbers, he's actually been underperforming quite badly this season. Like, there's certain areas in which, unless we're going to categorize him like Niantonso before, like, oh, you don't have to win your lane, all that sort of thing. If we're just looking at his strength as an individual player in a team where all the other players are in the running for like best in their position, top 3 in their position, in their respective role, and all putting up strong statistical numbers, there are areas in which Seraph actually, he isn't matching the rest of the team in that area. So let's look at some of them, and maybe they can spark interesting thoughts in those of you who know the game better than I do. So he has the second highest deaths among top laners. Now that's actually really surprising, because you think of some of the other top laners who actually do get criticism, okay? So someone like Inox regularly gets criticized. Quaz kind of had that early hype when he came in the spring split, but he seems to be one of those names that doesn't get mentioned now. Balls has obviously had struggles this split with the change in the meta. His synergy with Meteos doesn't seem to be as great. So it's not like everyone else is. In fact, if you think in general, the strength at top lane seems to be a bit depleted this season from before. Dyrus isn't necessarily the beast we used to think of before, where he could seemingly play 1v2, he could play 1v1 against anyone, and he would find a way to make it work. He wouldn't throw the game, in general, especially in the regular season, which is where a lot of these stats are coming from. But no, even within this, in theory, more difficult top lane meta where people aren't shining anyway, Seraph's having really big problems. He's dying a lot. He has the lowest gold per minute out of all the top laners and the lowest farm out of all the top laners. So CS per minute and gold per minute, lowest completely. Now that's really worrying, because, listen, if you can't get kills or you're dying a lot, okay, at least farm up. At least farm up. You can get the money, you can get your items, you can get tanky, you can get whatever the team needs from you. You can still play a role. It's like someone once described it to me like this. When you're playing top lane, as soon as you start to die enough times within the first, say, 15 minutes, you don't get to have fun anymore. Your job now is just solely just become a super tank and just absorb damage. Like, you don't get to have fun and try and win the game anymore. Your job is just to play your utility role. Like, that period's over where we gave you a chance to potentially win the lane and carry the whole game. That's over now. Well, we're seeing Seraph's potentially struggling in this. Even if they're winning games, it's not like you can really say it's because of him. It's, in fact, in some senses, it's in spite of him. And that's where the last stat comes in. So he had the second highest deaths among top laners. He has the second lowest KDA as well. So actually, every statistical field, the major ones that you'd put forwards, he's doing really badly in. Now, I'm not smart enough to know about the game or individual scouting to be able to tell you what it is about his play that's doing this. That's why actually I think this feature is interesting, because I'm kind of giving you some context and some of the environmental factors, or tying it into meta theory about how games in League are played, to give you some context to put the numbers in. But I also actually want this series to be where people can take this and then they can think, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way, and then since they know more than I do about the game, they can then take it and provide some of the actual basis for, like, yeah, actually maybe that is correct for this reason, or maybe it's wrong because maybe I haven't considered a factor. Maybe you come up with it when we springboard the idea of me. So hopefully that was an interesting look at CLG. I want to continue this. This is my first time, that's why I wasn't really about structured, trying to figure it out. But ideally, we'll keep going and we'll do another team next, and we'll look at the rest of the teams, and we'll try and find a way to put these stats so that they tell a story like this. There's some coherency to it. So hope you've enjoyed the first one. If you want to see these raw stats, by the way, that I took them, because I didn't give you the numbers, I just gave you like the relative figure, like second in the league or last. If you want to see the raw stats themselves, there'll be a link in the description box of this video, so you can go check them out there, make up your own mind, post comments, whatever you want. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of these, because obviously it's the easiest way to get them. You just click on your subscription feed, and when there's a new one, it'll be there. So bye for now.